I love my wife, so when she went on a business trip, I thought it would be a great idea to surprise her by flying out to see her with the kids. I never imagined that some surprises can be one-sided. The idea hit me out of nowhere one morning at breakfast. Sophie was absent-mindedly poking at her cereal, and Ryan was glued to his phone, lost in whatever game he was playing. Jessica had been gone for 3 days, and we still had 4 more to go, 7 days in total, which felt like an eternity. "What if we went to see Mom?" I suggested, setting my coffee mug down. Sophie's eyes widened. "Like, just show up?" she asked, clearly stunned by the idea. "Yeah," I said, warming up to the plan. "We could book flights today and be there by tonight. Just imagine the look on her face." That got Ryan's attention. He finally looked up from his phone and said, "That'd be kind of cool." Coming from a 13-year-old, that was as good as jumping for joy, so I ran with it. Within hours, we were packed, tickets were booked, and the excitement was practically crackling in the air. I could already see it in my mind, Jessica opening her hotel room door, gasping in shock before hugging all of us tightly, maybe even crying happy tears. We hadn't had a heartfelt moment like that in years. But despite all that excitement, a tiny knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I had tried calling Jessica that morning, but she didn't pick up. It wasn't unusual, work trips could get busy, but it still felt a little off. I sent her a text saying, "Hope work's going well. Just wanted to hear your voice." No response. An hour later I texted again. "Kids miss you. Call when you can." Still nothing. I shrugged it off, convincing myself she was just swamped with meetings. We landed in Chicago that evening, and the city was buzzing with life. Horns blared, lights flickered, and the air had that distinct downtown scent. The kids were practically vibrating with excitement. I rented a car, loaded them in, and punched Jessica's hotel address into the GPS. The closer we got, the more my heart started to race. I had sworn to myself that I wouldn't call her before we arrived because I wanted the surprise to be genuine. But now, a nagging feeling was crawling up my spine. I gave in and dialed her number. No answer. I checked the time, 9:43 p.m. Not that late. Maybe she was busy or already asleep. 5 minutes away from the hotel, I tried calling her again. Straight to voicemail. That knot of anxiety grew tighter. Ryan and Sophie were laughing about something in the back seat, completely unaware of how hard I was gripping the steering wheel. When we finally pulled up to the hotel, my heart was thudding in my chest, and I couldn't explain why. I told the kids to wait in the lobby while I got our room keys. "We're gonna jump out and surprise her, right?" Sophie asked, practically bouncing on her toes. "Yeah," I said, but my voice was strained. I walked up to the front desk, forcing a smile. "Hi, my wife's staying here, Jessica Carter. I wanted to surprise her. Could you tell me her room number?" The receptionist gave me a polite smile. "I'm sorry, sir, but we can't give out guest room numbers." "Right, of course," I said, sliding my credit card over. "Could you at least call her room and let her know her husband's here?" She nodded and dialed the number. I watched her face closely, waiting. Her expression changed. "Oh," she said, glancing up at me. "She's not answering." My stomach dropped. "Maybe she's asleep," I suggested, trying to sound casual, because the alternative was something I didn't want to consider, that she was deliberately ignoring the call. The receptionist hesitated, then glanced at her computer screen. "It does show she checked in, with a +1. My vision blurred for a moment. "Sorry, what?" The words came out hollow, like they didn't belong to me. She looked a little uneasy. "Yeah, the room's under her name, but she listed an additional guest. I just assumed you knew." I stared at her, the words echoing in my head. And then I laughed. It wasn't a normal laugh, more like a broken chuckle that burst out because I didn't know what else to do. I had flown across the country with our kids to surprise her, only to find out she was sharing her room with someone else. The sound of my laughter must have unsettled the receptionist because she looked away, clearly uncomfortable. I wasn't even angry yet. I was stuck in that surreal moment right before everything shatters, where the world is quiet, and nothing feels real. "Sir?" she asked, her voice cautious, like she was afraid I'd snap. "Who's the +1?" I asked, my voice cold and steady, too steady. She hesitated. "I'm sorry, but I can't disclose that information." I took a slow, deep breath through my nose, forcing myself to stay calm. "Right. Okay. I need a room, then." Her fingers flew over the keyboard, her eyes carefully avoiding mine. She knew. She understood exactly what was happening here. A moment later, she handed me a room key. "Same floor as hers, just a few doors down," she said softly. "Perfect." I walked back to the lobby, arranging my face into a mask of normalcy so the kids wouldn't suspect anything. "All set," I said, forcing a smile. "Let's drop our bags off first." Sophie was practically bouncing beside me. "Can we see Mommy right now?" she asked, her face lit up with excitement. "Soon," I promised, hoping my voice didn't crack. We rode the elevator up. Ryan was glued to his phone, and Sophie was humming some cartoon tune, both of them blissfully unaware of the storm raging inside me. Our room was nice, clean and perfectly average, but I barely noticed. I told the kids to get comfortable and order whatever they wanted from room service. Then I slipped into the hallway. Jessica's room was just 4 doors down. My feet felt heavy as I walked over, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. What was I about to find? A coworker crashing in her room? Some innocent explanation? Or something that would change everything? I stopped at her door, room 814. My hand hovered over the wood, shaking just a little before I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Silence. But I knew she was in there. I could feel it. I pulled out my phone and sent a text. "Hey, I'm at your hotel. Open the door." The message showed as read, but there was no reply. My jaw tightened, a surge of anger and fear twisting in my gut. Without thinking, I spun on my heel and marched back to the front desk. The receptionist looked startled to see me again. I forced a casual smile and slid my room key across the counter. "I locked myself out. Can I get a new one?" She nodded and started tapping away at her keyboard. Keeping my tone casual, I added, "Oh, and could you link my wife's room to my key? We always do that when she travels, you know, just in case." I managed a smile that I hoped looked natural, even though my world felt like it was teetering on the edge of collapse. She hesitated for just a moment before swiping my card and tapping a few more keys. "All set," she said, handing it back to me. "Thanks," I replied, keeping my voice steady as I turned and headed for the elevator. My legs felt numb as I walked back toward Jessica's room. The keycard felt like it was burning a hole in my palm, and my pulse wasn't just racing, it was thundering in my ears, primal and insistent, as if every instinct I had was screaming at me to stop. But I didn't. I kept moving until I was standing in front of room 814. I forced myself to exhale slowly. If I was wrong about this, I'd look like a complete fool. But if I was right... I didn't let myself finish that thought. My hand trembled as I slid the key card into the slot. Beep. The green light blinked, and the door unlocked with a quiet click. I turned the handle and pushed the door open. The first thing that hit me was the smell, a mix of cologne, sweat, and something else that I refused to identify just yet. It was the kind of smell that didn't belong in a room where my wife was supposed to be alone. The room was dimly lit, with just the bedside lamp casting a soft glow over the scene. And there, tangled up in the pristine white hotel sheets, was Jessica, with another man. I didn't even process his face at first because I was too focused on her, my wife, the mother of my children, lying there with barely a sheet to cover her. Her eyes met mine, and for one horrifying second, I saw something in them that chilled me to the bone. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't shame. It was annoyance, like my presence was the inconvenience. Then, in an instant, her expression shifted. Her eyes went wide, and she gasped, scrambling to sit up and clutching the sheets around herself like that would somehow fix this. Jason? She stammered, her voice wavering. The guy next to her stirred, still half asleep, his face twisted in confusion. He hadn't put the pieces together yet. I stepped further into the room and quietly closed the door behind me. My voice was icy and unnervingly calm as I asked, "Who's he?" Jessica's gaze darted between me and the man like she was desperately trying to figure out her next move. And then, as if she hadn't already torn my heart out, she actually said, "Jason, this isn't what it looks like." I let out a laugh, a short, bitter bark that echoed in the room, sharp and humorless. It was enough to snap the guy out of his daze. He looked up at me, his face going pale as he finally realized who I was. Good. I turned my attention back to Jessica, my voice still deceptively steady. Really? Because it sure looks like you're naked in a hotel bed with another man. Her face went pale, and she swallowed hard. I can explain, she whispered. I crossed my arms and leaned back against the door, blocking any chance of escape. Then go ahead. Explain. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, but no words came out. She let out a heavy sigh, rubbing her temples like I was the one giving her a headache. Jason, you're overreacting, she said, her voice suddenly firm and steady. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. I felt something inside me crack, sharp and painful. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The guy in bed, who finally had the decency to start putting his pants back on, cleared his throat awkwardly. Maybe I should. Sit the F down, I growled, my voice low and cold. He froze, his face going pale. Jessica rolled her eyes. She actually rolled her eyes, like I was the one being unreasonable. This is so typical, she muttered, her voice dripping with irritation. You always blow things out of proportion. I just stared at her, stunned. Was she serious right now? Jessica, I said slowly, forcing my voice to stay steady. I flew here with our kids to surprise you. Sophie and Ryan are down the hall, thinking their mom is working hard on a business trip. For just a split second, her face faltered. Guilt flickered in her eyes, but then her expression hardened again. Jason, you don't understand. I let out a bitter laugh. No, I think I understand perfectly. The silence between us was suffocating. Then the guy, Ryan, apparently, finally spoke up. He held his hands up defensively. Look, man, I had no idea she was married. Jessica's head snapped toward him. Ryan, shut up! But it was too late. The damage was done. A cold, humorless smile crept across my face. So, Ryan, I said slowly, you thought she was single? Ryan swallowed hard, his eyes flicking nervously between me and Jessica. Why, yeah. I mean, she never mentioned a husband or kids. Jessica's face went white as a sheet. I turned back to her, my jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. Wow. Not even a mention of US, huh? Her mouth opened, but before she could say anything, I kept going. You know what, Jessica? My voice dropped, low and cold. You're right. I don't understand. I took a step closer, my eyes locked on hers. So why don't you enlighten me? Her lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time since I walked into that room, she looked cornered, like she had nowhere to run. Her eyes flicked over to Ryan, then back to me, and then down to the floor as if she was trying to rewrite the narrative in her head. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, letting the silence stretch, letting her sit in the mess she'd created. I wanted her to feel every second of this. Finally, she broke. Her shoulders slumped, and her voice came out in a whisper. Jason, please. It's not what you think. A bitter laugh escaped me, low and cold. Oh? Because I think my wife is having a full-blown affair in a hotel room while I'm back home raising our kids. And from where I'm standing, that looks about right. Her lips trembled, and for a second, I thought I saw tears in her eyes. But then she did something that almost shattered me. She softened her voice, tilted her head just slightly, and reached out to me like I was the one who was overreacting. "Jason, I made a mistake," she murmured, her fingers brushing against my wrist. "But it's not what you think." Ryan shifted uncomfortably, his face flushed with embarrassment. Jessica, I should probably go." Her head whipped around so fast I almost felt the air move. "Shut up, Ryan!" she snapped, her voice laced with frustration. Even I flinched at the venom in her tone. I stood there, watching her closely, the way her shoulders tightened, the way her jaw clenched. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't sorry. She was angry because she got caught. I took a step back, shaking my head in disbelief. "You know what? Just tell me the truth, Jessica. For once. How long has this been going on?" For a split second, she hesitated. It was barely noticeable, but it was enough. Ryan's face went pale, and he ran a shaky hand through his hair. "Oh, F me," he muttered under his breath. I let out a bitter laugh. "That long, huh?" I kept my eyes on her, waiting for her to own up to it. Her face twisted with frustration. "Why does it matter?" she snapped. "Jason, seriously, why are you blowing this up like it's some giant betrayal?" I felt a chill run through me, numbing me from the inside out. "Some giant betrayal?" I echoed, my voice hollow and disbelieving. She groaned, rubbing her temples like I was giving her a migraine. "Jason, you're a great dad, okay? You're a great husband. You work hard, but I needed." She stopped, her lips pressing into a thin line as she squeezed her eyes shut. I took a deliberate step closer, my voice low and steady. "Say it." She looked down, refusing to speak. So I did it for her. "You needed something else." Her shoulders flinched, and her face twisted in pain, but she didn't deny it. Not even once. I took a shaky breath, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Jessica, our kids are literally down the hall right now. Sophie was so excited to see you she couldn't sit still the entire plane ride. And Ryan, Jesus, Ryan actually looked up from his phone long enough to come surprise you. She wouldn't look at me. Her eyes were glued to the floor. You weren't supposed to come," she whispered, her voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it. My stomach plummeted. I let out a choked, humorless laugh. "Oh my God, you were hoping to get away with it. You were just going to come home, kiss our kids goodnight, and crawl into our bed like nothing happened?" She flinched like I'd slapped her. But then, like something cold and cruel had taken over, she lifted her chin defiantly, and said the one thing that shattered everything I thought I knew about her. "You should have told me you were coming, Jason." The room spun. I felt like the ground had just been ripped out from under me. Ryan mumbled something under his breath, grabbing his bag. "Yeah, I'm out," he stammered before bolting for the door like the coward he was. I didn't even look at him. My world had just imploded. My voice cracked, raw and broken. Are you saying this is my fault?" She crossed her arms, her face blank, unreadable. "I'm saying if you had told me, this wouldn't have happened." Something inside me snapped. I could feel it, clear and sharp, like a thread finally giving way under too much pressure. I took a slow, shuddering breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Jessica, this didn't happen because I showed up. This happened because you made a choice." She scoffed, her arms crossed defensively. "Oh, please. Like you haven't been emotionally checked out for years." That one hit like a punch to the gut. I took a step back, stunned. "What the hell are you talking about?" She rolled her eyes, actually rolled her eyes. "Jason, don't act like you're perfect," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, like we were discussing something as trivial as forgetting to do the dishes. "You barely even look at me anymore. You're always working, always with the kids, and I." Her voice cracked just slightly before she forced herself to keep going. I just needed to feel like a woman again. I stared at her, waiting for the guilt, the remorse, the realization of what she'd done. But she just stood there, arms crossed and chin high, like I was the one who needed to apologize. And that's when it hit me, There was nothing left to save. Something inside me shattered, but not in an explosive way. Not in the way that makes you want to scream or punch a wall. No, it was the kind of break that left me feeling disturbingly calm. Like my soul had turned to ice. I looked at this woman, the woman I'd built a life with, the mother of my children, and realized she wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She was just bored. I let out a slow, steady breath, grounding myself like a fighter before stepping into the ring. Okay. Jessica blinked, her eyebrows knitting together. Okay, what? Okay. I repeated, my voice flat. I get it now. She shifted uncomfortably, her arms wrapping even tighter around herself. Jason, don't be dramatic. You're not in love with me anymore, I said, my voice eerily calm. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I took a slow step forward. You haven't been in love with me for a long time, have you? Her jaw tightened. That's not. Just answer the damn question. She hesitated, her gaze flickering away for just a second before she shrugged. It was so casual, so cold. I don't know. I laughed. It was a hollow, humorless sound that echoed off the walls. You don't know? I ran a hand down my face, trying to process the words. Her face twisted into a scowl, like I was the one dragging this out. Jason, I didn't plan for this to happen, she said, her voice clipped and impatient. It felt good to be wanted. I looked at her, my heart breaking all over again. You think I don't want you? She rolled her eyes. Not in the same way. Not like before. I felt my blood go cold. You mean not like a stranger in a hotel bed? She flinched just barely, before her face hardened again. That's not fair. Fair? My voice boomed through the room, bouncing off the walls. Oh, I'm sorry, Jessica. Is this situation not fair to you? Is this hard for you? She looked away, her shoulders tensing as she pressed her fingers to her temples, like I was giving her a migraine. I let out a bitter laugh. You want to feel like a woman again? I took a step closer, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Try feeling like a husband who just found out his wife has been sneaking off to hotel rooms with strangers while his kids are at home, begging for her attention. She let out a slow breath, her eyes still fixed on the floor. She wasn't listening. She wasn't even processing what I was saying. She was just waiting for me to stop talking. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman who used to cry at sad movies. The woman who used to leave little notes in my lunchbox before work. The woman who used to laugh so hard she couldn't breathe when Ryan told his dumb little jokes at dinner. But that woman was gone. Replaced by this stranger standing in front of me, arms crossed and eyes cold, acting like I was the problem. My chest felt hollow, empty. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain that was tearing me apart. But I was too numb to do anything but stand there, staring at the ruins of my life. She wasn't that person anymore. Or maybe she was, and I just wasn't worth it to her anymore. Either way, I was done. I turned toward the door. Jessica's posture went rigid. Where are you going? I paused, looking back over my shoulder. To our kids. You know, the ones you apparently forgot existed while you were busy feeling like a woman again. Her face twisted, ugly and cold. Don't be dramatic, Jason. I let out a low, bitter laugh. You haven't seen dramatic yet. Then I walked out, leaving her standing in the wreckage of everything she'd destroyed. My legs carried me down the hallway, but they didn't feel like mine. Every step felt heavy, like someone had tied bricks to my shoulders, but my mind screamed at me to keep moving. Just down the hall, in room 810, my kids were waiting. Sophie was probably sitting cross-legged on the bed, giggling at some cartoon, still buzzing with excitement over the surprise we'd planned. Ryan was likely halfway through a burger he'd ordered from room service, already texting his friends about how Chicago was actually pretty sick. They had no idea. No idea that their mother had just torn our family apart in a dimly lit hotel room with some guy named Ryan. No idea that the man who was about to walk through the door wasn't the same dad they'd hugged an hour ago. I stopped in front of our door. Just 4 rooms apart. 814 to 810. 4 doors down, their mother was probably still sitting in that bed, running her hands through her hair, not in guilt or heartbreak, but in annoyance. Annoyed at me? I clenched my jaw so hard it ached. I took a breath, slid the keycard in. Beep. Green light. The door opened, and I barely had time to step inside before Sophie came flying at me. "Daddy!" she squealed, her arms wrapping around my waist. "Did you see her? Was she so happy? Did she cry?" A lump lodged itself in my throat, nearly choking me. I forced a smile, swallowing down the bile. "Not yet, baby," I managed, my voice cracking. I ran a hand through her soft curls, trying to steady myself. "She was busy. We'll see her in the morning, okay?" Her little face scrunched up in confusion. "Oh, okay." But she was so trusting, so innocent, that she just nodded and let it go. Ryan was sprawled out on his bed, one arm behind his head as he half-watched TV. "So, what's the plan?" he asked, popping a fry into his mouth. My mind went blank. Plan? There was no plan. Not anymore. I was standing here, pretending everything was fine, while just 4 doors down, their mother was probably scrambling for excuses. I had to get them out of here. "You guys want to do something fun?" I asked, my voice sounding too bright, too fake. "I don't know. Maybe get some ice cream? Walk around the city before bed?" Sophie's eyes lit up like I just promised her the world. "Yes." Ryan gave me a curious look but shrugged. "Yeah, sure. Why not?" "Cool," I said, grabbing my wallet and stuffing it into my jacket pocket. "Let's go, then." Sophie scrambled to put on her shoes, her little hands fumbling with the laces. Ryan pocketed his phone, earbuds dangling around his neck as he followed us to the door. I took one last look around the room. Just an hour ago, this was supposed to be a fun family trip. Now, it was just a reminder of everything that had fallen apart. I made sure we left everything behind. Because we weren't coming back. We stepped out of the hotel, and the cold Chicago air hit me like a slap to the face, sharp and real. I needed that. Because nothing else felt real anymore. Sophie grabbed my hand, her fingers small and warm, swinging our arms as we walked down the bustling sidewalk. Her laughter cut through the noise of the city like the sweetest sound, so pure and innocent it hurt. Ryan walked beside us, hands stuffed in his hoodie pockets, earbuds still hanging around his neck. He glanced around at the lights and the crowds, a half-smile on his face like he was actually enjoying this. And me? I was just trying to remember how to breathe. I was just trying to breathe. Just trying to ignore the weight of my phone in my pocket, waiting for the inevitable call or text from her. Just trying to swallow the rage burning in my gut like hot coals. Just trying to act normal, because they couldn't know. "Not yet. Can I get 2 scoops?" Sophie asked, practically skipping beside me. I forced a smile. "You can get 3. Her whole face lit up. "Best night ever!" Ryan snorted. "Dad's in a good mood. We should take advantage before he realizes we're out past bedtime." They had no idea. We found a small ice cream shop, neon lights glowing against the dark street. The sweet smell of waffle cones and sugar hit me like a memory from a lifetime ago, back when things were simple, when a surprise trip meant happiness, not disaster. We ordered. Sophie got rainbow sprinkles. Ryan got chocolate fudge. I got something. I didn't even know what. I just needed to keep moving, to keep this night from collapsing in on itself. We sat at a little table by the window, and for a moment, it almost felt normal. Sophie chatted about school, her words tumbling over each other in excitement. Ryan teased her for still coloring outside the lines. I nodded, laughed when I was supposed to, took bites of my ice cream that tasted like nothing. Then my phone buzzed. I knew who it was before I even looked. My stomach twisted as I pulled it out. One new message. "Jessica, Jason, where are you? I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the screen. Then, I turned the phone off and slid it back into my pocket. She didn't get to ask me that. Not after what she did. Hey, Dad? Ryan's voice pulled me back. I looked up. Yeah? He narrowed his eyes at me, too smart for his own good. You okay? I hesitated, the lie sitting heavy on my tongue. But then I looked at him, at Sophie swinging her legs happily under the table, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. I smiled, and this time, it was real. Yeah, buddy, I said, my voice steady. I'm perfect. Because for the first time all night, I wasn't thinking about her. I was thinking about them, and how I was going to get my kids the hell away from her. By the time we got back to the hotel, I'd made up my mind. We weren't staying. I didn't care that our luggage was still in the room. I didn't care that we'd booked 2 more nights. I was getting my kids out of this mess before it touched them. We stepped into the elevator, and I forced my voice into something casual. All right, guys. Change of plans. We're heading home tonight. Sophie's face fell. What? But we just got here. Ryan frowned, his eyes flicking up to mine. Why? What about Mom? I exhaled slowly. Something came up. Ryan stared at me, his eyes narrowing. He wasn't stupid. He knew something was off. But Sophie, she was still too young to see the cracks in my voice, and I needed to keep it that way. But Daddy, she whined, her lower lip jutting out. We didn't even get to surprise her yet. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I know, baby. But we'll see her when we get home, okay? The elevator dinged our floor. We stepped out, heading toward our room. Just keep moving. Keep them distracted. But the moment we turned the corner, I froze. Jessica was there, standing right outside our room, arms crossed, waiting. Sophie's face lit up. Mommy! She ran toward her, but I caught her by the shoulders just before she reached her. Go inside, Lil, I said, keeping my voice steady but firm. Ryan, take her. Ryan hesitated, glancing between me and Jessica. He knew something was wrong. But finally he nodded. Come on, Lil. But... Now. My eyes never left Jessica's. Sophie pouted, but she followed Ryan inside. The door shut behind them, and just like that, it was just us. Jessica let out a sharp exhale. What the hell, Jason? I stayed silent, just watched her. She looked disheveled, hair messy, eyes sharp, like she'd been pacing ever since I left her in that room with Ryan. Good. She scoffed. Oh, so now you're not talking? That's real mature. I clenched my jaw. What do you want, Jessica? She threw her arms up. I want to talk. You just stormed out like a lunatic, took our kids, and disappeared. Do you have any idea how that looks? I laughed, a quiet, bitter sound. Oh, I'm sorry. Does it look bad for you, Jessica? Does it look like maybe you're a terrible wife and mother? Because guess what, you are. Her face twisted. Jason, lower your voice. Or what? I stepped closer, towering over her. You don't get to tell me what to do anymore. She flinched, and for the first time, real fear flashed in her eyes. Good. She should be afraid, not of me hurting her, but of what came next. Because I wasn't just mad. I was done. Jason. She tried again, softer this time. Please, let's go inside and talk. I shook my head. There's nothing to talk about. Yes, there is. Her voice cracked. This is our family, Jason. I let the silence stretch, let her squirm in it. Then finally, I said the words I knew would break her. You should have thought about that before you got into bed with another man. Her face crumbled. For the first time all night, she looked like she actually felt it, like she finally understood what she had destroyed. But it was too late. I pulled my room key from my pocket, opened the door, and stepped inside. But before I shut it, I turned back to her one last time. I'll be filing for divorce when we get home. Then I closed the door in her face. The moment the door clicked shut, I let out a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. My hands were shaking, my jaw was so tight it ached, but my mind was clear. This was happening. I was done. And there was no coming back from it. "Who was that?" Sophie asked from the bed, her little legs swinging over the edge. I turned, forcing a smile. "Just someone from the hotel, baby." Ryan didn't buy it. He was sitting against the headboard, arms crossed, watching me closely. "Was it Mom?" he asked flatly. I hesitated. Lying to Sophie was one thing, she was too young to understand any of this. But Ryan, he saw too much. I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. "Yeah." His expression didn't change. "You guys fought." It wasn't a question, just a fact. I exhaled, my shoulders sagging. "We just had a talk." He stared at me for a long moment, then quietly asked, "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" It felt like a punch to the ribs. Sophie froze, her big innocent eyes darting between us. "Wait, what?" "Damn it!" I crouched in front of them, choosing my words carefully. "Listen," I said softly. "Mom and I are working through some things, but no matter what happens, we both love you." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "But I don't want you to break up." My heart shattered. I pulled her into my arms, hugging her tight. "Oh, baby girl," I whispered, kissing the top of her head. "It's going to be okay. I promise." Over her shoulder, I met Ryan's gaze. He wasn't crying, he wasn't yelling. He just looked tired. And in that moment, I knew he already understood. He knew things weren't fixable. He just wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. Sophie sniffled against my shirt. "Can we just go home now?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Yeah, baby. We're going home." Ryan nodded. "Good." And just like that, it was decided. We were leaving. I grabbed my phone and booked the earliest flight out, one way, no return. Because we weren't coming back. Not to this hotel, not to this city, not to her. By the time we reached the airport, the weight on my chest had settled into something cold, heavy, but steady. It was over. No more pretending. No more pushing through the lies. No more waiting for Jessica to come home, only to feel like a ghost in my own marriage. The only thing that mattered now was getting them out, my kids. Sophie was half asleep against my side as we sat at the gate, her little fingers still curled around my sleeve like she was afraid I might disappear. Ryan had his hood up, scrolling through his phone, but I could tell he wasn't really looking at anything. He was processing. Thinking. I didn't check my phone, not once. I knew Jessica was texting, calling, probably spiraling. But she wasn't my problem anymore. "Do you think Mom's going to come home after us?" Sophie mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. I forced my fingers to unclench. "I don't know, baby." She yawned, rubbing her eyes. "I hope she does." I didn't answer. I couldn't lie to her. Ryan, on the other hand, snorted under his breath. "She won't." I shot him a warning look, but he just shook his head. "She didn't care. We were here, Dad. She didn't even ask to see us." His voice was quiet but sharp. "She only wanted to talk to you." "That says enough." I winced. He was right. Jessica hadn't fought to see them. Hadn't called me, begging to hug Sophie one last time, to apologize to Ryan, to explain herself. She had only wanted to control the situation, and when she couldn't, she let them leave without even saying goodbye. Sophie blinked up at me, confusion in her wide eyes. "Mommy still loves us though, right?" My throat tightened. I forced a small smile and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Of course she does," I murmured. "She always will." Maybe that was true. Maybe Jessica did love them in her own way. But love alone wasn't enough, because if it were, we wouldn't be here, waiting to board a plane home without her. The intercom crackled to life. A flight attendant announced that our plane was now boarding. "Come on," I said, standing up and grabbing Sophie's small backpack. "Let's go home." Ryan didn't say a word, just gave a small nod. As we walked toward the gate, something inside me felt lighter. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't just leaving Jessica behind. I was reclaiming my life. The flight was quiet. Sophie curled up against my side, her tiny body rising and falling in deep, peaceful sleep. Ryan had his earbuds in, staring blankly out the window. But I could tell he wasn't really listening to anything, just watching the night sky stretch endlessly over the clouds. And me? I sat there, staring at the seat in front of me, replaying every moment of the last 24 hours like a scene from a movie I never wanted to relive. The way Jessica's face twisted with irritation when I caught her. The way she made it seem like I was the one in the wrong. The way she let us walk away without even saying goodbye to her own kids. My hands clenched into fists. Then, with effort, I forced them to relax. None of it mattered anymore. We were going home. The problem was, home wasn't home anymore. We landed early in the morning, the sky still tinged with gray as I loaded the kids into the car. The drive back felt eerily silent, like even the world itself knew something was broken. When we pulled into the driveway, Sophie stretched and let out a sleepy yawn. "Mom's still at the hotel, right?" Ryan shot me a look in the rearview mirror, waiting for my response. I inhaled slowly. "Yeah, baby." Satisfied, she nodded. "Okay. I'm gonna make her a card for when she gets home." Ryan looked away, his face unreadable. He didn't say a word. I unlocked the front door, and the moment we stepped inside, the emptiness hit me like a punch to the gut. The air felt thick, too still, like even the house knew Jessica wasn't coming back. Sophie kicked off her shoes and ran to the living room, already digging through her crayons. Ryan walked in slower, his eyes scanning the space as if he were seeing it for the first time. I dropped my bag by the door, exhaling. And then, before I could stop myself, my gaze flicked toward the kitchen counter. Jessica's coffee mug still sat there, untouched, cold. A relic from the morning before everything fell apart. Ryan must have noticed too, because he scoffed under his breath. "Guess you don't have to make her coffee anymore." I swallowed hard. "Ryan! It's fine," he muttered, already heading upstairs. "I'm just gonna go to my room." I let him go. Because what was I supposed to say? That it wasn't fine? That I wished things were different? That, against all logic, I almost wished Jessica had just been a better liar? I closed my eyes for a second, ran a hand down my face, and let out a long, tired sigh. Then I turned to Sophie. She was already scribbling furiously on a piece of paper, her tiny fingers gripping the crayon like the words she was writing were the most important thing in the world. "Daddy, how do you spell love?" My throat tightened. I crouched beside her, gently brushing a curl from her face. "L-O-V, baby." She grinned, carefully forming each letter in big, uneven strokes. "Lovey." And underneath it, she wrote something else. I had to look away. I couldn't do this, not right now. Not when my daughter still believed her mother was coming back. Not when I had no idea how to break the truth to her. Not when I wasn't even sure what home was supposed to be anymore. The house was too quiet. Ryan was in his room, door shut, probably texting his friends about how his family had just fallen apart overnight. Sophie sat at the kitchen table, her tongue sticking out in concentration as she carefully colored in the heart she had drawn next to the word Mom. And me? I just stood there, staring at my daughter's perfect little handwriting, wondering how the hell I was supposed to tell her that her mother had walked away from this family long before I caught her in that hotel room. I pulled out my phone. No new messages. Jessica had given up. No more texts. No more calls. Not even a half-hearted excuse. And somehow, that hit me harder than anything else. I had spent years choosing her. Choosing our marriage. Choosing our family. And the moment she realized she couldn't talk her way out of this, she stopped choosing us altogether. "Daddy?" Sophie's soft voice snapped me back. I looked down. Her big, round eyes blinked up at me, full of trust. "When's Mommy coming home?" My chest tightened like it was caving in. How do you tell a 6-year-old the truth? How do you tell her that the woman who tucked her in at night, who kissed her scraped knees, who promised she would always be there, wasn't coming back? You don't. Not like that. I crouched beside her, running a hand gently over her hair. Mommy's going to be away for a while, baby. She frowned. Why? I swallowed hard. Because grown-ups don't always get things right. And sometimes, when they make mistakes, they have to figure things out on their own. She considered that, her little fingers tracing the heart she had drawn. But she still loves me, right? My breath hitched. I forced a smile. She'll always love you. It wasn't the full truth. But it was her truth, the one she needed right now. The one she'd hold on to until she was old enough to understand the real version. She beamed. Okay. Then I'll save this for her when she gets back. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Because she didn't know. She didn't know that the card she had just made would sit on the counter for days. Weeks. Months. She didn't know that every morning, she'd wake up and run downstairs, expecting to see her mom drinking coffee at the table. She didn't know that one day, she'd stop asking. That one day, she'd forget she ever made this card at all. And that was the part that broke me the most. Because no matter how much I hated Jessica for what she did, I hated even more that she could still break our daughter's heart without even being here.